I guess what somewhere along the lines, the people in Pennsylvania decided, if my life every Monday is going to be Groundhog Day, I might as well make it a great one.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. This is Jody.
I'm Elliot.
And we have a couple of quick announcements before we get into your story.
We do.
So Christine McDonald has joined the Facebook group, which if you listened a little while ago, Christine was lamenting it she couldn't join the group until she was caught up. She didn't feel worthy of.
Thank you for doing your homework and jumping right in.
So that is not a requirement for joining the Facebook group. We welcome all of you, anyone, even if you've only listened to one episode. So you can find that by going to our Facebook page and clicking right through to the group. You can also find all those links on sohere'smystory.com. And if you have not yet gotten our special episode, fastest way to get it is to text the word story to 345-345, and you can put in your email address that way, and swoosh, it'll be yours.
That is the sound of email.
That's the sound of email. So, okay. So Elliot tells a story today from his fascinating travels in a week of jury duty, but which actually ended up being far more fascinating than I thought it was going to be. But we jump into some things about how to make the shift from people feeling like they have to be there to they actually get to be there, which is a pretty important distinction.
I think so.
All right, let's go.
So here's my story. I've been in jury duty in York, Pennsylvania all week, as you know.
Yes.
Now, in York...
We're midweek, so...
Yes, we're midweek at the taping of this. And in York, as opposed to other jurisdictions, you have to go for a full week, whether you're chosen or not.
It's insane.
You're in a room without cell phones because you can't bring cell phones into the courtroom. There's no Wi-Fi. So you're just kind of there. Mm-hmm. And so you can imagine that I was dreading this. I actually walked in on Monday thinking it was like Baltimore County. It was one day.
Right.
I don't get picked. Yeah. I'm done.
Because you never get picked because you're a lawyer,
Because I never get picked.
Yeah.
So, but no, they're like, oh no, it's a week and you're coming back here.
That is such a big ask.
It's a big ask. And so you have a lot of people there. I don't know how many, but I know that the jury numbers are up in the 400s,
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people, big room, all the chairs are filled. And this inconveniences everybody, except for maybe the 5 people who are retired and think this is a hoot, as they've said. But it inconveniences most everybody. And so people are kind of grousing. Can you believe we're going to be here for a week? We have to do this. It's cold. You surrender your cell phones. You take off your belt when entering the courthouse. So you're just the whole process. Right.
And the poor people who work there, who each week get a new group of people who think they're cracking funny jokes about the whole we have to be here for a week thing.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So you've got all of that in the mix. And that's really part of the reason I wanted to tell this story. So we go in, we assemble in the jury room. We've gone through not only security, but a couple different roll calls where they don't even call you in order 1 through 400. So you know when your number is. They call you randomly. Ugh. So you're just not sure and you have to pay attention. Anyway, but I expected when the woman who is in charge of us at the front of the jury room was going to address us, I really expected that she was going to say something that would let us know that she kind of commiserated with us. I know you're going to be here all week. We're all in the same boat. I know you just kind of to humanize this and capture the feeling that most of us were having, which is, oh my gosh, this is just such a departure from our lives.
I know this is a big ask.
I know this is a big ask and whatever. Yeah. But she didn't do that at all. What she did, and she was relentlessly cheery, she was saying, this is great. She said, I know you may not think this right now, but this is great. I have to tell you that I'm really happy you're here, and it's really important what you're doing. Now, you may think, we didn't have a choice or something, and I get all that, but you could still come in here grumbling, and you could come in here angry and all that stuff. But you're here and and you've been listening, you've gone through the whole process so far. And I really appreciate it. You guys have been great. And this is so important.
Oh, it's like the presumptive close almost.
It's so important what you're doing. Okay. So then she showed the video. And the video I figured was going to be just introducing us to what the jury process is in the courtroom. And it did part of that, but it was more inspirational about the jury, the place of the jury trial and the juror in preserving and protecting and defending
like why you
individual liberty, why you matter.
And was it decently well done so that didn't feel like a cheesy sort of like...
No, it was well done. And then when we're led back into the courtroom, when you have a panel that's chosen from which the actual jury is going to be selected, you're led back into the courtroom for questioning by the judge and the lawyers. And the judge, I've done this twice now in 2 different courtrooms, the judge has been extremely not only positive, but very expressing the gratitude from the bench and talking about the importance and the mission and why jurors and the notion of a jury trial is our first, best, and last defense against injustice from the government, and how he's seen juries in incredibly difficult situations stand up for the ideals on which this country was founded. And he's constantly amazed.
So at the end of this, are you like almost oddly disappointed if you don't get picked?
Well, the whole point is you start to actually feel, proud
like
that you're there.
Because
you buy in, you're part of this thing at every step, whether consciously or not, at every step in this process. They didn't just present it as, well, I know this is an inconvenience, it's something to get through, but please just do your best and we'd appreciate it.
Because in like the world of things that there are, jury duty is right up there with like going to the MVA. No one's ever tried to take the MVA and be like, all right, folks, you're here. Although that's totally different.
But what they were, so one of the judges that was talking said, look, there are only a couple things that rise to the level of mission critical in this country. One is voting. One is paying your taxes. One is serving on a jury. And of those 3 of them, I wouldn't put it in that order. And he was just talking about it.
Interesting.
And it wasn't just one person doing this and the rest were going, I know it's miserable, but you'll get through it. The message was consistently tying you to the meaning behind your service. And they call it your service.
Right. So it wasn't just a video that they make you watch at the beginning that isn't backed up by the people that you encounter there, that it is baked into the culture of that or that particular organization.
Yes. Every person and every significant step in the process, to the extent that the people involved had a speaking role, were all singing from the same sheet of music. So, okay, I am super fascinated by this, which is much more fascinated than I thought I was going to be when you said, I want to tell a story about jury duty. I'm like, great. This is going to be fabulous. Point, but that's a part of why I'm so interested, because honestly, I know when I think of jury duty, when I think of the people at each of the little, not tables, but like, each step along the way where somebody takes your thing and tells you where to go or whatever. I was reminded, that movie Monsters, Inc.? Sure. The lady who works there for, give me your papers. Wazowski. Like it has that kind of, I'm not sure which one of us did that worse, but I think everyone will know who we mean. Yes. Like that kind of vibe of like, blah, like everything's just like blah. And that's what I think of. Not that they're that bad, but instead you're talking about taking something that is, like stereotypically, iconically that way. And not only has it been revamped and kind of turned around, but in a way that really comes like from a cellular level out. So how and why, like, because I've been in a fair number of jury or governmental places in general, it's never like that. So why, how, like chicken, egg, what came first? How do you think that is? I don't know, but just so backing up just 1 second, you're right that when you think jury duty, the joke is that a jury is comprised of 12 people who are not smart enough to get out of jury duty. And you think about skipping jury duty, getting out of jury duty. And by the end of the process, you're like, who are these ne'er-do-wells who want to skip out on this kind of service to our great nation?
Well, just even the fact that we refer to it as jury duty, and which can have a connotation of some honor, what is your duty to, whatever. But the fact that they're even referring to it as service, like if it says, your service of being on a jury is a totally different come from than the way like duty, obligation, like have to versus I love the way that guy put it, like those things that are fundamental to being part of this governmental, country.
Yeah, it's amazing. So to your question, how did that happen? And the first answer that I have to give is I don't know how it happened in Pennsylvania. But
you have 2 more days, Elliot.
I have 2 more days to really get to the bottom of this. But the question where I'm really curious is not necessarily how did it happen in Pennsylvania, but how can it happen? Which is what I think you're getting at. So, because if you took the administrative judge, the chief administrator of this particular judicial district in Pennsylvania, and he says, I want to start referring to it as service rather than just jury duty. Okay, you can make that proclamation. But first of all, if that person, he or she, is serious about it, then you have to figure out, okay, well, what does that mean? Who are the frontline personnel that are responsible for making that change? How do you get buy-in from the frontline personnel? And then what are not just the big things like saying, hey, it's a service and not whatever, but what are the little things that we as an organization can do in our interactions with those we hope to impact, the public, that are going to cleave to this change in mindset?
Well, and also in a way that the people saying it, like you could have, if that woman who came out that did the initial speech that you referred to, that was so inspirational, you could have given her that script to memorize. But if she didn't believe it, if she didn't authentically think that, it would never come out. It would be terrible. So it's like, what are the behaviors? How do you actually create that as a belief system as well as a set of actual actions that are happening? And because interestingly, I made a joke about the MVA a few minutes ago, but I saw the opposite bad version of that at an MVA place years ago. And this is going to be a terrible story because I can't remember the actual thing the guy said, but I was sitting there waiting and he made some crack. And it was almost like,
he was an MVA person.
The MVA person. And he made some crack about MVA, the best place in the world or something. And he was being really snarky about it just as I was like walking up, and he and the lady were cracking up or were, sort of making these jokes. And it was almost sort of just, I forget what it was, but it was something that almost made me want to say like, I shouldn't hear you saying those things. I can't remember what it was. And he looked at me and he got this really sincere look on his face. He said, I'm sorry you heard that. He said, but we're required to say that every time somebody, whatever it was, every time somebody walks up, and it's just not, and it was something that just wasn't true. And it was interesting. Like I said, it would be a much better story if I could remember any of the details of it.
But that makes a lot, I can see exactly where that is. If it's not authentic, it's worse than not saying it at all.
It's exactly right. And he felt it, and he felt inauthentic and insincere saying it. And so he was doing it in this like super snarky voice.
Exactly.
And it was so, and then whatever comment he made after that was the one that he's like, I'm really sorry you had to hear that. He's like, but we are required to say this, and it's not true. And because it was something like the MVA loves you or something like that. And he was like, it's not true.
Right. But, but it does, this kind of discussion does remind me of something that I do all the time, and I've just recently stopped it. So, I do a lot of speaking, and
you stopped speaking?
I stopped speaking. So this podcast is going to be remarkably one-sided, although not that much different than some episodes. But no, so a lot of times when I would open a talk, particularly if it's on contracts or something like that, I would say something to the audience akin to, it's It's 8:00 in the morning. It's the first thing of the day. And you've decided that you're going to spend the next 50 minutes listening to a lawyer talk about contracts. And so that line always gets a laugh.
Sure.
It always gets a laugh because it's like, I don't want to listen to a lawyer. But at the same time, in thinking about it,
diffuses the actual.
It does.
Yeah.
But it was brought up to me that, hey, you know what? That line gets a laugh, but you're talking down what you do, which is make this subject interesting. You're playing to your audience's least common denominator of what they think about you, and then you raise it up. But you don't have to do that. You could just start off disabusing that without even addressing it at all.
Yeah.
And so it's the same way.
Yes.
As this.
Yeah, exactly. It's the and I'm so glad you got back to that, because the first thing I jotted down when you were telling this story, and this ties back to something we've touched on in a couple other episodes of like, what are you being really clear on what you want to reinforce and what you want to create and what you want the vibe to be. And it's such a fine line, because what I'm not talking about here is doing it in an inauthentic way. Like, hey, everybody, this, like when Baltimore played around with, oh my goodness, Baltimore has such a bad history of bad slogans.
The city that reads.
The city that reads, which was like, okay, whatever. And then there was another really bad one. Then for a while, although I hope this is not still the current one, the slogan was changed to the best city in the world.
The best city in the world.
The best city in the world. I'm like, really? Really? I love Baltimore. I'm not like itching to move.
But it's not necessarily like, Paris.
There's Paris, New York. I mean,
Florence, Venice.
So many city of Milan. Like, I don't know. Like, I just think it's one of those things you're like, oh, I can't stand behind that statement. So it has to be authentic, but I do think there's a real risk in, as much as we talk about the importance of real and honest in business, because we both get so irritated with the like, everything's great kind of nonsense. I think there's just as much risk of playing into the like, I get irritated when you're like, Mondays are bad. Well, not really. Like, they don't have to be. Like, what story are you telling? What things are you, what's the word? Propagate? What's the word I want? Propagating. Thank you. What are you propagating? What seeds are you planting and watering and nurturing in the culture and the experience of your employees and the people who, the frontline people who interact with your customers and your clients? Well,
and that's true, because one thing that I've really consciously for years have tried not to do is play into the, boy, I'm glad this week is over.
Yeah, the misery loves company.
The misery loves company. God, I can't believe it's Monday again. My God, and you can have that, hey, we're all in the same boat kind of vibe with your people, with your team. But at the same time, what you're playing into is, oh, I'm just one of you because I hate being here just like you do.
And then that becomes the story. Like the story you tell then becomes, it reminds me of those, I read back from when I worked in architecture days, I read this study about like urban planners, like especially on like college campuses and things. Sometimes when they're doing plans, they'll plan out where all the little pathways go. And sometimes they'll not put in all the pathways on a quad, and they'll just let it be that way for a while and let the paths, let the paths sort of wear in the grass. And then that's where you put pathways.
That would make sense.
Whatever. I think it's a really cool way to go. But this is almost the negative version of that. It's like you're that first, not quite the same, but in that scenario, you're the person who's walking through that grass and wearing that path in the grass that then becomes a pathway that people use because it's there and it's visible and you've cleared it for the walking on. So like, what path do you want to start clearing in the grass for your people? The one that's like, woe is us, or the one that connects them to an authentic higher purpose or higher cause, and it doesn't, I don't even think it always has to be some sort of like, oh, this is the reason we exist. Right. I mean, in this case, there is something there to tie it to, but just some bigger shared meaning. Yeah.
I mean, you're right. I won't say it's easy, because I think it was probably a gargantuan task for them to create this pride in jury service that is genuine. It feels genuine and authentic from all the people from the bottom up that are in the process. So I'm not minimizing that, but they do have an easier tie. They can say, look, in the Constitution, and we're dealing with life and death and freedoms and things of utmost importance to the litigants. So you can tie it to that. And not everybody is Susan G. Komen and tied to breast cancer or survival. But to your point about the narrative, if you have a client come in and you know it's going to be a lot of work and you're like, okay, all right, they're coming in. Or if the narrative consciously, if the path you decide as the leader to start to wear in is, yes, we got this in my world. We got this merger. We got one of our clients is buying this company. It's going to be really cool. They're expanding, they're doing this, and it's going to be it's kind of complicated. So there are a lot of details to it, and we really get to go in and figure out the best way to do it. And they get to double their company in size. Whatever it is, that's not tied to life and death and freedom or the cure to cancer or whatever it is. But you can start charting that course of we're excited to have this business in, as opposed to, oh my God, I know it pays the rent, but
and there's a whole other, so we haven't even touched on this yet. So let's take this back a step to, we've been talking about how you get your employees to act in a certain way so that your customers have a certain kind of experience. But there's sort of I don't know if I'd say control flow, but there's a circuitry here that is interesting in that they are setting the stage that then changes the experience of the people who then create their experience. So you are someone who knows that you have just inconvenienced people out of an entire week of their lives where they're not going to have their cell phones. They don't have Wi-Fi. They can't get stuff done. They're often going to just be sitting there and no one's good at sitting there anymore. How does one handle a large group of people? I mean, if you're facing down the barrel of every single week of my life, a new set of irritated, of unhappy, like already, no matter how nice you are, they're disgruntled. They're already unhappy. So it's kind of interesting. I almost wonder if it was at some point like a psychological experiment. Like, I wonder if we can convince them, if we can set a stage that then actually isn't inauthentically trying to convince them of something. It is actually changing the experience so that they have a different experience. And then they're not just awful people to be around every week, because they have to look at a whole new set of these people every single week.
So they transformed individual discontent into a group mission. I think that's incredible. Now, I don't know how it was done. We started to touch on, pursuant to one of the points you raised, we started to touch on, well, how was that done? Was it top down, bottom up? Was it somebody who's like, I'm going to face these people who hate me for standing in front of the room. I want to change that narrative. Did that go all the way up to the top?
I could see them all. I mean, I'm totally making this up, but this would make for a great movie where, these poor people who work there, who have to get kicked in the shins all week by a new set of people every single week. Somebody, being at like happy hour and something, and somebody being like, you know what, next week we should just like try this thing. We'll just set this whole new stage and see if people react to us differently. And they like try it once and it works. And so now they do it like every week, and then it sort of gets baked in or something. I don't know. It makes me wonder if there's a way to get like my kids to do their chore. Can I change their individual discontent into a group mission?
but the interesting thing with the whole jury duty thing is the video that they showed us cost real money. So I think that, and my point in raising that is, if you take a look at some point, if they did make a conscious decision that they're going to change the narrative, they had to find a small victory, I'm sure, that didn't cost anything. And they had to start seeing some success in changing the narrative before, I'm just guessing on this, but before they got buy-in enough to get government dollars behind it to really start reinforcing this theme. And I'm interested in what the small victories were.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could be something as simple as sort of those frontline people genuinely saying, thank you so much for being here. I know it's an inconvenience, but it really matters. Versus, like you said, thinking me like, all right, folks, I know this sucks, but here's what it is.
But okay, but let's say that a frontline person did do that, and it's heartfelt and it's genuine, and it was genuinely appreciated by the people who are serving. you still have to have a metric that came back, because how would the court system, how would even that person know that that's successful enough so that they can keep building on it?
Well, I don't know in this case. I mean, this is a really interesting question, because I don't know that even now there's exactly a metric that you can point to. I mean, I would actually, when I was thinking of it earlier as this like psychological experiment almost, it would be fascinating if you, I mean, there's no way to have actual parallel things going on, but if you did, like, I'd be very curious if you could watch one courtroom scenario right there in New York where they're getting the treatment you did, another one where they're getting the like bah humbug misery loves company treatment. How does that show up in juries? Are like more people convicted or not convicted, or like are people engaged, not engaged? It's very
but it could show up.
Fascinating.
It could show up in the number of people that are trying to get out of jury duty or leave early or answer the question. Well,
just
yeah,
jerks.
because my brother-in-law is a police officer, that would impact my ability to be fair and impartial on this jury. You know, just answering questions in a way that's designed to get them out of it. Maybe they have fewer dissenters because you do have you know, avenues along the road to kind of dissent and to get out. I don't know how it shows up, but when it comes down to business and change in the culture, I think that's one of the important questions. Yeah. How does the culture you're trying to fix show up? So how does the fix show up? And it could be just very little subtle ways, not just, well, the balance sheet is better.
Yeah, not everything has to track back to a stereotypical ROI. I mean, in the case of this jury, I could also imagine part of the outcome, one of the ROIs is just simply the people who work there not being disgruntled themselves, just
could
from
be less
cranky
turnover.
People, less turnover. Exactly. Because it would be pretty awful to imagine. I mean, talk about hating your Monday. If every Monday you have to go in and de-escalate another set of people who have walked in, decided that they are grouchy to be there. And not just grouchy. I mean, imagine if you have an hourly job and you can't work for a week, you don't get paid. I mean, this for some people, it's an annoyance. For other people, it could be a major issue. So
yeah, it can be. And so I guess what somewhere along the lines, the people in Pennsylvania decided, if my life every Monday is going to be Groundhog Day, I might as well make it a great one.
Yeah, exactly. You have to find some way to make it better.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group, as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email, and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best
Lovingly
of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us. Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.